So welcome to week 3 of the Beatitude home group series. We're excited to journey with you, and this week we're looking at, now since we started, we looked at how to be poor in spirit as the starting point for discipleship and how to really acknowledge our need for God. And then last week we spoke about mourning for our sin, mourning for the state of the world, and really, I suppose, acknowledging that only God is our salvation.
Yeah.
That
Pursuit of God, acknowledgement of our own brokenness.
And now we take the next step up the mountain, which is, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth.
Yeah.
And again, this is a little bit of a challenging thing because meekness, I mean, if I say the word meek, what comes to mind for you?
I kind of get a picture of a mouse and an elephant, and this little mouse cowering in the corner, and this little meek creature that is really insignificant against what the world is throwing at them. And it's not a very positive word.
It's not very manly.
Yeah, it's not very manly. It's not very, when you think of what we need to obtain as men, it's kind of like, you need to be brave, you need to be strong, you need to, Eli's favorite thing at the moment is the Hulk, because he's big, he's strong, he's powerful. So as human beings, we want to achieve the strength and the power and the awe of being in control. And I think that's our human nature. But Jesus actually depicts this understanding of meekness and humility perfectly as he speaks about these Beatitudes, because
Jesus calls us to do these things, and he epitomizes all of them.
Exactly,
so he calls us to be like him, and so if he's saying we must be meek, he was meek.
Meek, yeah. Which is an interesting concept, because again it flips it on its head.
He was not a pushover. I mean, he engaged in, with the Pharisees in a very direct kind of way. He turned tables in the temple. He
will come again, and his robe will be dripped in blood, and he'll be carrying a sword. That's not a meek and mild kind of approach, but in Jesus' essence, this meek and mild is actually a form of strength and power, and we'll dig a bit deeper now.
Yeah, I think that. So we started with, first there's this desperation of needing God, knowing that there is nothing apart from God, in this poverty of spirit, and then we mourn, realizing that we have nothing to offer. And then this next step is allowing God to take the lead, and I think that's really what meekness is. There's a really nice definition of meekness as controlled strength. It's choosing to say, I'm going to use my strength not for something destructive or abusive
or self-serving.
I'm going to use it to submit myself to the will of God.
Yeah, and I think that's what Jesus did. I mean, Jesus knelt down in the sand. Jesus, met people where they were at, in their brokenness, in their mourning from last week. And I think that's why he uses this one as the third one. He's like, he will meet us there. He will meet us in that brokenness, in that mourning, and he will bring a humility and a meekness into those situations, but not a lack of strength and a lack of power. He has all that in reserve. It's kind of like a backpack of all that in the back, but that's not what he brings us. He brings us humility and meekness.
I suppose the best example that I can think of in scripture is when Peter's freaking out just before the crucifixion, and the guards are coming to fetch him, he chops off the guy's ear, and Peter's worried, rightfully so.
And then he denies
him. But Jesus says to him, Peter, like, what are you doing? Don't you know that I could, at a moment, at just one word, I could command a legion of angels or 8 legions of angels to come and rescue me? So he has all that strength, and yet he chooses to use it to serve. He chooses to use it to submit himself to the will of God. So I guess the question for us is, what does that really look like? What is submitting ourselves to God? How do we do that?
Yeah, well, I think the definition of meekness, let's start there, is actually patience, long-suffering, enduring in injury, without resentment, submission, and controlled strength. And I think when you start there, when you understand there is this reserve for others. I'm not meek, I'm not mild, but in order to reach others, I will be humble, I will serve others. Very different to that of the Pharisees who are loud, who are boisterous, who are in your face, follow the rules, or you're gonna, go to hell. In essence, he comes and he has a different approach. He humbly and meekly comes and he says, I will get down on the ground with you. I will serve you. I will show you a different kind of way to do things. And as he does that, he draws the crowd. suddenly there's people who are going, what's different about this guy? Why is he, because the world tells us to do other stuff. The world tells us to be self-serving, drive yourself. And yet Jesus shows us this different way, and he draws people to himself. Yeah.
I think the whole thing, though, is about choosing God's way over your own way. And it's interesting that the promise associated with this beatitude, blessed are the meek, because what? They will inherit the earth.
Yeah.
And think about the people that Jesus was speaking to. He was speaking to people who are dispossessed. Land is a really big deal in our country at the moment. Land is a very hot topic. It continues to be this issue that people fight for, and land is a big deal, especially for the Israelites. They were oppressed by the Romans who had taken their land, and he's saying the people who are meek will inherit the earth. And our thinking is always, well, if I'm going to take the earth, if I'm going to inherit the earth and own it,
take it by force.
I'm going to have to take it by force, military action and strength that I'm going to have to bring to it. And here he's saying, no, actually the way that you gain is not by going in your own strength, it's by trusting in God's way.
And God's strength. I mean, they had the Roman Empire at that stage, which was the dominant force, and it took everything by force. So it was a different way of viewing it, and it changed the way the followers at that time were their headspace that they were in.
And if you think about strength, I mean, the Roman Empire was this mighty empire that at that stage looked completely unconquerable.
And it's gone today.
I love that. I love the story John Ortberg writes in his book, Who is This Man, speaking about Jesus. And if you had to look at Jesus' followers, and they're like, well, it's this motley crew of random fishermen.
12 randoms,
They are really uneducated people. And if you had to look at them in that time and think, well, what's going to last 2,000 years later? Is it going to be that, or is it going to be the mighty Roman Empire? You would not have bet on the followers of Jesus.
Yeah.
And that's choosing God's way over the way that makes sense sometimes, submitting to God's word. I love how he says now, we name our children after the disciples of Jesus, and we name our dogs Nero and Caesar.
Yeah.
And so it's just interesting how things change. But that's really what meekness is.
Yeah.
It's about trusting God's way and submitting ourselves to him.
And that word submission is not a nice one these days, and nobody wants to submit anymore. But in order to submit, it requires a bit of strength and self-control.
But we feel like submission is about weakness, but actually submission is about strength.
Yeah.
It's choosing to submit yourself
to the will of God. Yeah.
Yeah. So you never answered my question before. How do we do that practically? How do we actually submit to God?
Sure. I was trying to avoid this question. No, I think it starts with you've got to look at the character of God first. You've got to look at God's approach to us. Very often we would have probably gone if God had said, you will do this, you will do that. And I think that's the way the world views Christianity today, which is very sad, is, this dogmatic approach. It's all just a bunch of rules, which is not at all what it is. But if somebody approached me like that, I wouldn't appreciate that at all. I would be like, well, that's not going to happen. But God, again, he turns the table, and God's character and his heart is for us. Christ's death was for us. Christ's life was for us. It was this meek and humble approach. So it's the character of God. I think we've got to look at that continually.
We're afraid to submit ourselves to God's will and way because we feel like it's going to be to our detriment. But when we know the character of God, we know that his way is always the best way, even if it seems impossible or difficult or contrary to the way that we think it should be.
But God says, seek him and everything else will follow. When we submit our plans and our desires, God's character is always to give us the best outcome that there could be. And yet when we try and do it in our own strength, and it kind of fails. But when we meek and humble ourselves to God, the outcome is the best that it could possibly be.
So I guess choosing to submit ourselves to God starts with trusting his character and knowing who he is. And then I think it's a day-by-day, moment-by-moment decision. You have to be connected to God so that you can hear the promptings of the Spirit who says, yes or no or stop or go. So I think we just have to choose to get up every morning and say, Lord, I choose to go your way today, to lay your dreams down, lay your plans down, ask God what he wants for you, to be seeking him in big decisions and small decisions, and just including him in every part of your life.
It's character, it's seeking the heart of God. So it's God's character, seeking the heart of God, and then walking in the community. And again, I keep coming back to this, but it is so important to hold each other in this process, as we journey up the mountain, as we humble ourselves, and as we mourn, and as we, poor in spirit. we got to continually walk together. You know, so I wasn't humble this week. You bring that to the home group and you walk that journey together in the pursuit of the top of the mountain.
Or I'm struggling to trust God, to submit to His will. Like it's different, you know, it's not like a once-off thing. In different areas of your life, you may feel like, well, I'm submitted to God, and then maybe it's now suddenly you realize, well, actually my finances or my children or whatever it may be, I'm not submitted to God in that area, and to keep working on those things.
Yeah, and then every step you take, you know, you're looking down and you're taking the next step. You know, pride, you might have dealt with one step in pride, and then God reveals the next step, and you walk together and you hold each other accountable in that, and then eventually you look up and you're standing on top of the mountain, you know, and God doesn't say, I will take away all your suffering, all your, you know, everything, and you'll have a perfect life from now till eternity. No, He says day by day you walk that journey with Him up this mountain, and as we do that, we do it in community. God will eventually, you'll look up and you will have dealt with that, and you'll look up and you'll be standing on the top of the mountain.
So blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth.